Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of History with Sai. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the ancient city of Ebla, located about 60 kilometers southwest of the modern city of Aleppo, Syria. For the longest time, archaeologists and historians didn't know the location of Ebla, though they'd read about it in ancient texts that they'd found all over ancient Mesopotamia and the Near East. In the mid-20th century, the city was discovered, and in the early 1960s, excavation at Ebla began. What archaeologists found there was truly remarkable, and we're going to talk about it. So, without further ado, let's begin. Though occupied since 3500 BCE, Ebla reached its height around 900 years later when it became one of the most powerful kingdoms in northern Syria. It's from around this time that we actually have an extensive archive of something close to 11,000 cuneiform tablets. The tablets are written in both Sumerian and the local Ebelite language, the latter of which is the oldest example of a written Semitic language to have ever been discovered. Found in a part of the site that archaeologists have labeled Palace G, most of these documents are of an administrative or economic nature, essentially describing accounts of goods such as textiles, metals, and rations given to citizens of the city. In fact, the archives tell that the palace provided sustenance for something like 15,000 to 20,000 people, which is pretty impressive. All of these people didn't necessarily live in the city. There were many, perhaps hundreds of villages that were part of the Ebla economic network. Many of the leaders of these villages or towns would form a council that would serve as an advisory body to the king. Texts from the archives also provide the names of many of Ebla's kings and members of the royal family dating back to around 2800 BCE. The archives also paint a relatively clear picture of the city's scribal school, where some of the teachers who taught there were instructed in, or themselves came from cities as far away as Kish, some 800 kilometers away from Ebla. Politically, Ebla competed with two other powerful cities of northern Syria, Nagar and Mari. Regionally, Nagar seems to have been the most dominant of all early Bronze Age Syrian cities, though there's no clear record of it ever having outright control over the other two mentioned. Its power came from the fact that it had more smaller cities that had either pledged allegiance to it as vassals or had formed alliances with it. To maintain the balance of power, as well as to secure allies, the kings of Ebla often entered into marriage alliances with the ruling houses of other cities. One example from the archives is where the ruler of Ebla gave his daughter in marriage to the ruler of Imar, another prosperous and fairly powerful city of ancient Syria. As mentioned before, the name Ebla appeared in the annals of other cities and empires, most notably the Akkadian Empire of Sargon the Great. It's also around this time period that the Akkadian Empire was active in the region and that Ebla seems to have been destroyed for the first time. It's not exactly been confirmed which king was responsible for this, but Naram Sin claims to have been the first to have conquered it. It's possible that his grandfather, Sargon the Great, who also claimed control of the area, may have not conquered the city outright, but merely accepted tribute from it. Regardless, the once prosperous city had been reportedly put out of existence during the years of Akkadian rule. Ebla seems to have been rebuilt and made to prosper once again during the years of Neo-Sumerian rule. However, when that empire crumbled, so did the city of Ebla, which was destroyed yet again around the year 2000 BCE. There must have been something, though, that was special about Ebla, because it was back on the map 200 years later, again prospering from the textile trade. At that time, it was probably part of the kingdom of Yamhad, the most powerful state in ancient Syria at the time. Ebla's final end, though, came around the year 1600 BCE, most likely being put to the torch by the Hittites under Mushili I, who was rampaging through ancient Syria and the upper Euphrates area at the time. After that, Ebla was more or less uninhabited and forgotten, the exception being its mention in a few ancient texts that were found in various archives. As you can see, it was a pretty interesting and regionally important place, and one that I feel needs to have some more coverage in ancient history books. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you learned something, and if you did, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Also, check out the many other videos on ancient history. Take care, and and I'll catch you next time.